this video, I'm just going to try and share some of the tips that I would give you if you're going to take a B2 or C1 English test at any of the official language schools in Aragón. The first thing you need to know is the structure of the exam, what you're expected to do, and the time you have to do it. So, for example, if you're taking a B2 test, you have two different parts. You have the first your somehow your individual long turn. You have 3 minutes to prepare it, and you have to speak individually for some 3 minutes. At B2 level, you're not allowed to take any notes for this task. And then when both of the candidates have done their individual long turn, then you will have your interaction or co-production, as it's called now. You will have 3 minutes to prepare it individually, and then you will have to speak, you have to interact for 4 minutes if it's 2 candidates, or sometimes it has to be 3 people, so it will be 6 minutes, but typically it will be in pairs, 4 minutes. The structure of the exam is very similar in the case of C1, but the times are slightly different because you have to speak for longer. For your individual long turn, you have 4 minutes to prepare it, and at C1 level, you are allowed to take some notes, to have some quick notes just to jog your memory, to remind you of what you want to say. You can't read from a text, that's very important. It's just bullet points. So you have 4 minutes to prepare it, and then you have to speak individually for 4 minutes. In the interaction phase, your co-production with another candidate, you have 3 minutes to prepare it individually, and then you will have to speak for 5 minutes if it's a pair, or 7 if it's 3 people. In both cases, for your individual long turn, when the time is up, the examiners will interrupt you and say, "Thank you very much, that's enough," or something like that. Are you going to see the timer? There's no clear answer for that. It tends to depend on examiners. Some examiners do show the timer, some examiners don't. But they will tell you when it's time for you to stop anyway. Something I can advise you to do is not to repeat the question that you're going to be given literally. You're going to be given a set of, guiding questions, so don't repeat it. It's not a question of reading. What you can do instead is to move from one point to the next, use expressions such as regarding whatever, regarding unemployment, regarding the new laws, or as far as unemployment is concerned, or about unemployment, something like that. Signposting the different topics you're discussing is a very interesting thing to do, but please don't repeat the question literally, okay? Typically you're going to get something like this. You might find some pictures and then, as I said, guiding questions. The pictures tend to be there just for inspiration, so there's no need for you to focus on the pictures or to describe them. No, don't waste any time doing that. Just have a look at the questions, which are there to guide you. The guidelines say that there is no need to answer every single one of them. However, you do have to talk about some of them. Imagine you have to talk about the environment and you have some guiding questions. So some people might just see that the topic is the environment and then start talking about many different aspects related to the environment, but not answering the questions. No, you can't go off topic. You have to stick to the questions. You can change the order though. You can answer, I don't know, if you're going to take questions 1, 3, 5 and 7, so you can start with number 5, then number 3, then number 7 and then number 1. Whatever. There tends to be a logic, but it's not necessary for you to follow the order. But please stick to the kinds of things you have been asked to talk about. Okay, so don't talk about general aspects which are not included in the questions. And this is exactly what the guidelines for these years say. For your monologue, your long individual turn, you have to prepare in silence. You can't take any notes unless you're taking the C1 exam. And then you can have very quick notes, but you can't read them. And then about the topic, you have to stick to the topic, although it's not necessary for you to discuss every single aspect. When you get to the interaction or co-production phase, the idea for you is to somehow agree to a certain extent with your partner, but essentially disagree. You have to reach a common agreement. If you agree from the start, then the conversation is going to be very short. So agree to a certain extent, but essentially disagree. Try to negotiate, try to find points in common, and work towards reaching an agreement. It's not necessary for you to finally agree, to make a decision, but you should work towards it, with this mixture of agreeing and disagreeing. You can have a look at some more tips and how not to get tongue-tied, how to know what to say at these posts in my blog. Okay, and now some tips before you actually cross the door of the classroom where you're going to take the exam. My main advice would be for you to warm up. The same way athletes have to warm up before they run or they do whatever sport they do. So warm up and get your brain thinking in English before you actually start speaking in English. So, for example, if you happen to meet your exam partner, if you meet the other candidates before the exam, what you can do is to start talking with them for you to get used to their accent, to the way they speak, for them to do the same with you, of course. And then you can start speaking and thinking in English. If you don't feel like talking or you just don't know who you're going to take the exam with, what you can do is to bring some headphones and MP3 player, mobile phone, whatever, with songs, podcasts, whatever you feel like listening to, but in English. So even if you're not speaking, at least your brain is working in English. That's the main idea. Finally, if there are people around you who are so stressed and nervous and terrified of the exam that are getting everybody else as terrified as they are, please stay away from them. You don't want people getting you nervous if you were okay. So try to stay away from them and you'll be much better off. Believe me. During the exam, as we said, you're going to have some think time, some time for you to think about what you want to say, the ideas you want to say, how you're going to say it in English, because you may know lots of things in Spanish, but no, try to think of the ideas you can say in English and how you're going to link those ideas together. So just don't waste your time. Try and make effective use of your think time. And something else you should think about is what relevant keywords and grammar, what vocabulary and grammar you're going to use during the exam. Remember, it's not just a question of answering the question. You need to show off your level of English. So you need to impress the examiners. You want them to write very positive comments and it's not just about not making mistakes, it's showing that your English is really good. So try to think of what keywords and good grammar you would use in your exam. This is especially true for the monologue. We said that you're going to have a set of guiding questions, but even if they are independent questions, try and and be cohesive. Try and find a connection and a relation between these guiding questions, and try to signpost it, to say where you are and say what you're going to talk about next. So if you have started talking about this and then you're going to change to a different subject, then you can say moving on to, or regarding this, or about that. So try to signpost it, as I say, indicate where you are, but also try and use linking words. If you're going to say something which is the consequence, or you're going to do something which is a contrast or whatever, so try and use the same linking words you would use for a writing task, for example, and that could be okay. Finally, being coherent means don't contradict yourself. If you said something in the introduction and in the end your view is completely the opposite, something has gone wrong. So try and keep the same line of thought all along your monologue. Okay. I'm going to insist on this idea here. The questions you might get will probably be easy to understand because they are intentionally easy. It is the examiner's role for you to understand the questions, okay? So they'll be easy to understand. But don't be deceived by that. You need to show your level. So even if you have very easy questions, please don't give very easy or don't give very short answers. Remember, the examiners are not interested in what you really believe about something. So don't just answer the question and that's it. No. Give more information. Elaborate a bit further. Give information, give causes, give consequences. About your level of English, again, this is an excuse for you to show that you can use interesting adjectives, keywords, nice grammatical structures. So try and show off. Try and leave the examiners impressed, saying, wow, that was very good. As far as pronunciation and intonation are concerned, many students are worried that they have to sound like a native speaker. And obviously non-native speakers can't sound 100% like a native speaker. What you have to aim for is, at the very least, to make yourself understood so that anybody speaking standard English, be them native or not, can understand what you're saying. Typically, some problems of not being understood have to do with pronunciation, typically with pronunciation of vowels, okay, so be careful with that, but also with stress. If you want to use the word pavement, the stress is on the first syllable, so pavement, not on the last one. Many times if you change the stress of a word, speakers won't understand what you're saying. Or if you use the word this carriage, the stress is on this syllable here, not on the first one, not on the last one, and also the vowel sound, okay, be careful with it as well. So it's the same idea for every word, and just sentence stress. Try and sound, try and get the music of English, not just the pronunciation. If during the exam you realize you have made a mistake, or you have said something that you know perfectly well how to pronounce or how to say, but it slipped your tongue, if it's just a minor thing, or as I say, a mistake with verb tenses or something like that, self-correct. Say it correctly the second time round. It's okay. Nothing happens. It's much better for you to self-correct and say, sorry, I meant this, than to leave it incorrect. If you realize, don't worry. Correct it. Something that native speakers use is the so-called fillers. Fillers are words or expressions that somehow to fill a gap in conversation. For example, when you need time to think, So, for example, if you are asked a question and you don't know what to say right away, say, well, let me see, or let me think. So you're buying some time for you to think of what to say next. You could also use expressions such as, maybe at the end to join sentences. Using fillers is okay and is natural because native speakers use them. But don't overuse them. Don't use them all the time because it's boring, and some native speakers actually complain about them. So, just occasionally use fillers, or when you need it. When you think of the interaction, the co-production, many times I compare it with a table tennis match or a tennis match or whatever. The ball has to keep changing chords all the time. I mean, the right to speak has to keep changing and moving, because it's not one monologue, I finish, and then my partner starts his or her monologue. No, it's a conversation, it's an interaction. Okay, so these are some of the things you could use, some expressions that actually encourage interaction. For example, if your partner says something and you agree with them, instead of saying, oh yes, you could say, absolutely. Or you could say, I see your point, or I see what you mean, when you agree with them. Or when you agree with them partially, you could say, I see your point, but, or I see what you mean, however, and then you give your opinion, your other version. If you want to disagree somehow, you could say, your point is well taken. Okay, I admit what you're saying, I recognize that what you're saying may be right, but your point is well taken, but. When you're explaining something and you want to ask the other person what they think, or just, somehow tell them, now it's your turn to speak, you could use question tags. So, for example, listening to Natalia is very tiring, isn't it? So you're saying, now, say something. You could use question tags, or you could use expressions such as, don't you think? Listening to Natalia is very tiring, don't you think? Or just to indicate that you're paying attention to what the other person says, you could use expression, as you said before, making reference to what the other person mentioned. Just finally remember that in the official schools of languages in Aragón, 40% of your mark, of your grade, has to do with how relevant your production or co-production is, how coherent and cohesive and fluent you are. And then 60% has to do with your language, with how accurate it is, and how linguistically, written, varied, and showing the language of your level is. So that is essential for you to remember. 40% has to do with this, 60% has to do with this. So that's it basically. Very good luck with your exams.